I'm Brian Freise alongside Laura Duncan, and you're listening to the Triggered and True podcast. This is a podcast that's all about you, discovering you, going back for you, being with you. You're more than the pain you've experienced, the behaviors you're expressing, and the thoughts that run through your head. Together, we will find your true self, which has always been with you. It's just been covered up. Tune in as we show you how to feel your pain, get comfort, and go play as you return to you. It's time to transform from triggered to true. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Triggered and True. We hope that everybody's doing well and learning and growing as we're all working through the compassion method process together. So how are you doing today, Laura?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm good. But we can be honest too and talk about when we're not good, because right before the podcast was aired, I was sharing some of my trigger experiences because despite co-hosting and moderating a podcast on triggers, I still have them. So
yes, we all do. I still have them too.
Yep.
You're in good company.
Yeah. Laura, I have a suspicion that your triggers are not as ugly as mine.
No, they still come up too.
But I don't think they're as ugly as mine. You can be honest and say, Brian, yeah, you're probably right. When I trigger, It's probably not as ugly. Yeah. But, I was talking to, actually, I had a one-on-one with one of my employees right before this, who's been through the compassion method. And we were talking together about just life and just the consequence of stacking this pain throughout your life and never comforting it. And then when it comes out, just how ugly it is. We were talking about a couple issues in our lives with people, friends and stuff, of things that were happening. And we're like, gosh, at least we now know what's happening. Because before, like, you'd see like a friend or somebody act that way and you're like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. Do I even know that person?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is relationships. After we've learned the compassion method process, just kind of reanalyzing some of the relationships we have with friends and extended family. We've talked in previous podcasts extensively about the relationships with spouse and children and, those more intimate relationships. But what about the ones that are maybe just a step removed from that? Family, extended family, and friends. And I think when you were in your school, the second year of the school, a bunch of the students were recently asking about this, or they were just commenting on how kind of different their life is and some of the relational aspects with some of their friends and extended family.
Yeah.
Pre-compassion method versus post-compassion method. So maybe just share a little bit about some of the insights and some of the comments people were making.
Yeah, I think that people try to figure out, where do we stand? It's kind of almost the boundary conversation as well. Where do we stand with people once we're not living in a triggered state? For example, if your way that you connected with friends and family was to fawn, and so you were constantly trying to make everyone else okay around you, and all of a sudden you're no longer codependent. You're no longer in a place where you feel like you have to make everyone else okay, because you now know you can be okay no matter what. But now we've created a system, usually our whole entire lives, because most of our triggered responses started at a young age, where our family and our friends are used to us acting a certain way. A little bit like you just said, like people, when we trigger, we don't understand what's happening with people. But when people no longer trigger in the same way, in the same reaction, that can be just as much of a trigger for the person that's used to you fawning your whole life. And now you're not trying to make them okay. And now you're not trying to please them and help them. That can really make a big difference, not just in the negative way of being triggered, but also I no longer need to fawn to make you okay. So now I'm just going to be me and be in relationship with you. And that changes the whole dynamics.
And is being me enough if I'm not trying to meet all of your needs, friend?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And that's the big question, because as much as we're programmed to react and get triggered in our ways, whether that's fight or flight or freeze or fawn, people are on the other end of that, used to and adapted to our behaviors when things go wrong. So it's interesting how we just get used to our triggers, because many of us don't even know what a trigger is, let alone what to do with it. And even more so, how to respond if somebody, a friend or a family member, is being triggered.
I think what people are also probably realizing is that some of these things that they thought were friendships were really kind of codependent.
Yeah.
Not really wasn't a two-way street, potentially, if they're
a lot of
scenarios
times we'll
where
see that, where it was just more of a reaction relationship, not a relationship connected to who we really are, our true selves.
Yeah.
Not just who we are, but also who the other person is.
I think it's so common in the human relationships for that element of codependence to develop. And as we learn the compassion method, our own love for ourselves won't put ourselves in positions where we're just being used or abused a little bit.
Exactly. And I really like that because, it's pretty trendy to say, like, we don't want to be with toxic people anymore. Now that I'm healthy, I don't want to be with toxic people. Now that I'm healthy, I can't be friends with that person anymore. Now that I'm healthy, I know differently. And so now I have a different perspective on life, which is all true to some degree, that as you get healthier and less triggered and you're more connected to your true self, things are going to change, like we're talking about. But one of my favorite things with the compassion method in regards to relationship is that you don't have to get rid of people. Because if I'm going to be fully who I am, I can be connected with anyone.
Yep.
Even if they have toxic behavior, they're not a toxic person. So I can still be in connection with who they really are, but I may prefer not to be in connection with toxic behavior. There's a very big difference between getting rid of a person because we believe they're a toxic person versus deciding what type of behavior you want to be around, but still being able to see who that person is and seeing them as a triggered person, not a toxic person.
I think what you're getting at is what a lot of people describe of like, I'm healthy now, I don't need to be around toxic people. That's really just another form of a trigger. And that trigger is flight.
Yep.
So we're just going to run away from all the toxic people in the world. But the beautiful thing about the compassion method is we can learn to be okay, even if we're forced to be.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's, when let's say when you get married, you're picking your spouse, but you're not really picking your extended family. So
sure, it's packaged deal.
Some of that comes along for the ride, and you're like, well, and you could be like, well, there's some toxic people in my extended family.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be around them. But then there's a funeral or there's a holiday get together of some sort. And
here we are, we're all together, kid. Now what? How can we be okay in any situation, no matter what? And I look at it, from my perspective of, oh, this is an opportunity. This is a challenge. This is actually an adventure to be had.
Laura, you would look at it that way.
No, totally.
Everyone else is like, everyone else is thinking of that Thanksgiving or that Christmas coming up, and they're like in just dread, like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? And Laura's sitting there like, oh, this is so exciting.
But it really is, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have new eyes to see. Because before I only saw the triggered person, and I resented and I was frustrated and I was disconnected and I was looking at the clock, just trying to get it over with. But now I know there's a true self inside of every triggered person. And now I get the opportunity to potentially re-meet my in-laws from being in my true self.
And you're just using that hypothetically.
Triggers. Like hypothetically, yes. We don't actually have to go do it. No.
Right. But you're hypothetically not using your in-laws as an example of
yes, exactly. I'm just saying, kind of anyone that you're in a situation where you feel like you have to be in that situation, which technically we never have to be, but we choose to because we love. If you're married, you care about your spouse, and so you are going to do what is in what's important to them. So being able to do that, we can either be a victim in it or a martyr in it of, oh, I just have to go because it's your family and I don't want to have anything to do with it, but I'll just put up with it because I love you. Or just as much as I love you and your true self, I know your parents and your siblings and your family are an extension of that. How can I get to know who you are, who they are in connection to you? There's a whole world waiting to be discovered there that we get blinded by in our triggers, and all we can see is behavior. We can't see person.
Yeah. And you're never going to be able to do this if you don't take care of yourself first.
No, it's impossible. It's it's a pipe dream that some people have. No, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be different with my in-laws because everybody else fights with theirs. And I'm going to love them and fawn and fawn and fawn, which I also did. And I'm going to make it different. But that doesn't mean it's actually going to be different because you're still triggering, even if it's fawning and trying to make them happy and okay with you. It's the same thing as resenting them and frustrated and pushing them away. The flip sides of the same coin, trying to either get connection to please and to feel connected, or trying to push away and be disconnected because the trigger is too much for us to handle. But being able to go through the compassion method allows you to be able to be okay. And we've talked about it before, being okay is clear-minded, tenderhearted, at peace in any situation with any friendship or any family relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. You've also talked about being like a superpower.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's like you get to see almost like from like a different vantage point, or you have like different lenses on, like if we could put on like glasses that you could have like x-ray vision, you could see things, it's kind of like that to a certain degree, because all of a sudden what you thought was the problem isn't the problem anymore. It changes the whole thing, because if they're just triggered and it's just a reaction, now I'm curious about their wound.
Right.
Whether that's my place or not my place to go and connect with them in that way. I know they would never treat me that way if they weren't sad or scared or lonely. And that's how I see them, even if they're speaking badly to me, even if they're acting badly to me. That's not what I'm seeing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other aspect of it is it's so empowering, because
Empowering.
we always talk about how, you don't have to be certain places, but there are times when you actually didn't really have a choice. Like you got put into a situation, or like I said, a funeral, or somebody's in an accident and everybody shows up at the hospital, and these people are there that you don't really like to be around. But the reality is, the superpower nature of it and the empowering part of it is that I don't have to live in mortal fear of being around this person, or mortal dread. I know that I can be okay, even if I have to.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And that allows us to be okay within ourselves, even when we're in a situation or a circumstance that we have to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, the whole part. Oh, one thing to maybe explain, you used the word a few times and not everybody might understand what fawning is. And you've used it a couple times.
I have
there.
used it a couple times. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Give a definition again for those
So when
that
we
don't
go
know.
in a triggered state and we're engaged in our amygdala and we're in that, we react with 4 different ways, or a combination of these 4 ways. So we fight, which is pretty understandable, or, we understand what that means. Or we flight, we want to get away from the situation. Or we freeze, where we just don't do anything, we're just stuck in it. Or we fawn. And fawning is trying to make the other person okay so that they can love you and connect with you in the ways that you need. So instead of fighting against it, you try to make them okay. And so that was definitely a go-to for me when I was, still is at times when I'm in a triggered state, but definitely trying to make the environment okay so I could be okay. Make the person feel loved so they would love me. And it's a kind of a deceiving one, because it looks so good. I look like the good daughter-in-law that's, connecting with her mother-in-law, but really I'm fawning, trying to get her to like me and to care about me so I can feel okay with it myself.
And that's what we talked about. I was kind of joking earlier when I talked about it being ugly.
Yeah.
My triggers tend to be more, fightish. So they look a little uglier. And, but it could be, just because it's ugly doesn't mean it's, just because it's not ugly doesn't mean it's not any less a trigger.
Exactly. No, yeah, exactly. Like when you think about people like being taken advantage of, or being a doormat, or letting people walk over them, or not recognizing their value or worth, that's a lot of times connected to fawning too. And that actually is pretty ugly, even though it doesn't look like quote unquote bad behavior. It still is pretty ugly to see someone not be able to know their worth and stand up for themselves and make decisions based on who they are, that they would sacrifice themselves to give to people that aren't worthy of receiving that because they don't know who they are.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about the kind of being the victim. So you were talking about it in terms of, if you were, let's say, going to this holiday gathering that you don't want to be at because maybe the family dynamics are just not great. and you kind of force yourself to do it, kind of the martyr, like, I'm just going to do this for my husband,
Yeah.
or do this for my wife. And then what ends up happening is there's some resentment there. And the other thing is that really happens when you're the victim is it ends up being all about you.
Exactly.
So when we are in our triggered self, it is all about us. All we see is our pain.
Yep.
And really we become a very generous, good-hearted person ends up becoming one of the most selfish people because everything's fixed on them. And when there's an obvious reason for the pain, because there's this long list of all these things, ways
there's these cases we've built,
all these ways these people have hurt us that we don't want to be around. We're like, well, I'm justified. And the more of that is, the worse it is, because you can never really see past yourself.
Yep. They continue to grow as the villain, and you continue to grow as the victim, and you're equally the victim and the villain in those situations, which the truth is you're neither a victim and they're neither a villain. They're just two triggered people reacting differently. And being able to recognize that changes everything, because now I'm empowered. It's not happening to me anymore. Even if I feel like I have to go somewhere, it's not happening to me, because I'm choosing to be who I am in the midst of it, and to see past people's behaviors, to see who they really are. And even if they continue to have behaviors that classify them potentially as a villain, that's not how I see them. They don't look big to me. They actually look small, because anyone that's treating someone badly is little. They're not a big adult in that moment, a big villain in that moment. They're actually a child in that moment, because they're treating me in behaviors that are connected to their amygdala, their child brain, not their adult brain.
Yeah. That's a big hurdle to get over, because it sounds very lack of compassion, because we're not, there isn't what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost a lot of what people call compassion just ends up kind of enabling people in where they're stuck.
Well, it's validating their pain, but it's not actually giving compassion for the wound behind their pain. So when someone says, my mother-in-law treats me terrible, she does this and this and this, and it's just the worst. Like when we're hearing those things, it's actually making us very small in that moment. We're not able to actually be empowered and be ourselves in that moment. And so that's what really changes it. It's not actually the other person. It's my perspective, my wound, that is interpreting their behavior through that lens.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, that person has friends and people that like them and want to spend time with them and enjoy them, because they see them in a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is it's kind of like throwing a bucket of cold water on me when I'm triggered, to recognize like just how much I'm focusing on me. And like, it's focusing on me, because obviously the compassion method is focusing on yourself, but it's doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
It's actually doing it in a non-selfish way, because just the way it works, the more I focus on the compassion method, the more I work through the remote control exercise, the more I focus on receiving the 10 gifts and filling my heart with love, the more I can be with other people, the more not selfish I can be.
Yeah.
That's like it's just a side benefit. It's just,
and it definitely is.
Yeah, it's just kind of that side benefit of taking the time to work through this process. Yeah, and we've been talking about this a lot in terms of situations where, being okay going to the holiday gathering, but we also can talk about this on the reverse side.
Yeah,
being okay not going to the holiday gathering.
Oh, that's a good one too. I like that.
The whatever the event is.
Yeah, the event or the ways that we've showed up.
Because how many things do we go to because we feel we have to check a box?
Oh, exactly. No, that's a great point. A lot of it is just us feeling like we are a victim to having to go, when, yes, like we've talked about, there are some things like a funeral or a wedding or something big that we end up going to. But, there's lots of small things we do that we don't have to do, but we don't know how to love ourselves in that, to be able to say no.
Yeah. Yeah, because we can be okay. And I feel like definitely in my early childhood development, I got drug along to a lot of things because they were the right thing to do. It was the right look. Yeah. And so I definitely have that today where I'm like, well, how will it look if we don't go? How will it look? And it's like, oh, that's because I don't feel like I'm enough. And I want everyone to be, he shows up at everything and he's always there. And, well, I want to be able to be okay not going to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I like when I recommend for a lot of my clients when I meet with them one-on-one, when like the holidays are coming up or they have a big event that they're going to be connecting to family or friends that are challenging or triggering to them, is I have them do like pre-triggers or like pre-remote control exercise. So like you just realized that, okay, let me ask the question, why do we have to go? Because what are people going to think? All the things that you just said and what many people are thinking as well. But being able to ask yourself that question ahead of time, let yourself try to do it as realistically as possible. Like say to yourself, like, we're not going to go to so-and-so's house this holiday season, and sit with it. What does that feel like? What emotions come up? What lack comes up? And actually be able to help walk yourself through it ahead of time. So then you can make a decision. Was it me just being triggered and forcing myself to go and forcing others to go? Or do I actually really want to go once I work past my trigger and I've moved past not feeling enough and I've moved past what other people are going to think? And now I choose to do it because I want to do it, not for any of those other reasons. And I feel like that really helps for two reasons. One, it helps you make a more honest decision in the choices that we make in our life when we pre-process the trigger. And then second, it sets us up to say, okay, I know why I'm triggered going into this. So for example, if I didn't feel like I was enough, I'm going to, even as I'm at the event, I'm going to be focusing on the gift of enough. I'm going to be connecting with compassion to my heart in the middle of the process, not waiting for the other person to do the thing I'm expecting them to do. So then I'll be triggered and then we'll have a terrible time together, but I'm actually pre-processing my trigger so that I can connect with people even real time in the moment of our usual triggers that come up.
Mm-hmm. No, that's actually very good advice. Very good pre-work. And we don't want to anticipate bad things happening, but we've been like, I've been to this event for 20 years in a row.
Exactly.
And every year I know that
that so-and-so's going to probably do this and so-and-so's going to do this. And then I'm going to do this because
so-and-so is probably going to make a passive aggressive comment my direction.
Exactly. And I'm going to have put up with it the whole time. And now I'm just going to crack because I was trying to be the good one.
And then I'm going to go home and dump all over my spouse and kids because I'm so upset.
Exactly.
And it wouldn't have been proper form. It wouldn't be proper form to get that upset at the holiday gathering. But
exactly. No, it's true though.
But on the car ride home, let her rip.
And really, another thing that it does when we pre-process a person that we already know that we're probably going to be triggered with, again, we're not trying to be pessimistic. We just historically know that usually in family events, this is how I get triggered. This is how they get triggered. Another thing as well is being able to stop the blame cycle. If I can ahead of time say it's nothing to do with this person. It's nothing to do with my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my friend, my anyone. It's nothing to do with them. It's everything to do with me. So it pre-sets you up to stop the blame cycle that happens because we build these cases and long after the holidays are over, we can be in January and February and March after the holidays are long gone and we're still ruminating. We're still telling our friends how bad they were. We're still bringing it up in conversation. We're still validating someone else's pain based on, yes, my in-laws are horrible. So are mine. We're able to continue that process of not being able to actually take not just ownership, but take the time to actually connect to my own wound instead of blaming them.
Yeah. And that's what you talked about before is it's just not fair that the other person gets all the attention and you leave yourself wounded and hurting.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
And really, they don't even get all the attention. Their bad behavior gets all the attention. They're lonely.
Yeah.
No one's connected to them. And I'm lonely because no one's connecting to me. It's just our triggers that are having a relationship, but we're all alone.
Yeah. Yeah. You're connecting people, triggered people, triggers connecting with triggers.
Yep, exactly. But I bet
Triggered
you
cells,
anything,
triggered
if we
cells.
interviewed that family member or that friend that you had that trigger with, they're probably just as sad, just as frustrated, just
Yeah.
as scared. They're probably having a difficult time from their perspective too, because all we're doing is in our triggers reacting to each other, not actually being able to see each other.
Well, there's a reason why they act that way. Yeah, no doubt.
Exactly.
I remember you gave me a mantra to kind of repeat to myself, it's not about whatever the person or the trigger is. You just say,
Yep.
it's not about.
Yep.
And what I find that does is it just softens me up to
Yes.
turn my affection, to turn my focus back to my heart.
Yeah.
And it just, like you said, it breaks that blame cycle. It allows me to actually do what I actually have control over.
Exactly. It's your heart, your behaviors, yes, but your heart is what we're able to actually take care of in order to have a different outcome.
My behaviors flow through my heart. So if my heart is well taken care of, my behaviors will not be, those ugly triggers we were talking about earlier.
No, they will come. It'll come out differently when our heart's full of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love is patient. Love is kind because we're full of love. If we're not full of love, we're impatient. We're unkind.
Yeah. Well, to kind of conclude our time today, do you remember if there were any insights that your students shared from their pre and post going through it that you could leave our group with?
A couple of insights that I noticed. Obviously, they said more than this, so there's probably even better ones or different ones, but just some of the ones that stood out to me. And it's a little bit of what I said earlier, but I loved one person said that they just kind of had this they would go through life, and when things got too triggered with people, they would just kind of be like, okay, we're done with that relationship. And they would just move on. And they were saying how they realized they actually went back to past relationships from kind of the compassion method, okayness perspective, and was able to actually reconnect with past relationships that they thought they had to get rid of because of triggers. And then it set them up for the future of recognizing you don't have to just get rid of people along the way when you have triggers. You can actually talk about it and work through it and actually reconnect with people that you in the past got rid of, which I thought was really cool because, there's probably going to be people that we prefer not to stay connected to because of their behaviors. But if we got rid of 10 people in our life that were at one time good friends or good family members, there's going to be something redeemable in that we just got rid of because our trigger told us we can't be in a relationship with
them.
They're
unsafe. They're toxic.
They're unsafe. Yeah. Exactly. They're toxic. They're unsafe. And so we just got rid of them, but we actually still grieve for them. We still long for them. Our true self still wants to be connected to them. And just the kind of reconciliation that happened with one of the students of being able to recognize I can still be in relationship. The relationship may look different. They may not be talking every single day and spending time together every single day. But the biggest part about it, even if you don't even see that person very often or connect with that person very often, the biggest thing about it is they don't haunt you anymore. When you look back at broken relationships,
you're not at the grocery store and see them coming down the aisle. Quickly put your head down, turn around, and act like you didn't see them.
Yep, exactly. Have a huge physiological response to it. So your whole body starts reacting, your heart reacts, your brain reacts. You're no longer able to be yourself. You can actually see them and be able to say, okay, this is an opportunity. Yeah. And I thought that was great to be able to go back and reconcile some relationships that were majority of it was just because we were in triggered places, not because we actually didn't care about the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know for me personally, just going through the process, definitely having the ability to understand, because logic is important to me, because that is
logic is very important.
Definitely my most developed side of my brain, and we're working on catching the other side up.
Yeah.
I feel like when I lift, my right side is just so much stronger than my left, and I've got a little bit of a sore shoulder on the left side right now. So when I was working out this morning, I was doing some shoulder presses, and the left side was struggling so bad, and I'm like, that is a picture of my brain, except in reverse.
Yeah, exactly.
My left logical side of the brain is just so strong. But so it's still important for me that as I've gone through the compassion method, when I think of pre and post, looking at friendships and any kind of relationships, the amount of understanding I have for people of why they do the crazy things they do is just so much better. The logical side of my brain is satisfied. things that I would look at before, like, how could someone do such and such a
Mm-hmm.
thing? Like, how is that
Yep.
even possible? Because they're a professional, they're a this, they're a that.
Mm-hmm.
And how could they act like
Yep.
that? Oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
I
Which is
totally
so
get it.
helpful because the unknown is what causes us to push people away as well. Like,
Yeah.
if we
Oh,
had
they're
the
scary.
understanding, we could feel safe with someone, but because it's unknown, it does feel so much scarier because we don't know where it's coming from and why it's happening. And that feels very unstable.
Oh, there's a friend that I have, and we do some business with him. And I saw him today, and I was like, the same thing. Like, he's had some big triggered moments and done some things that definitely people would want to stay away from him. But I'm like, I know
Yeah.
his true self, and his true
Yeah.
self is amazing.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
I love his true self. And I'm not overlooking the other stuff.
No.
I
Yeah.
understand it, and I'm not scared of it.
Yeah,
That's the
no, I
point.
think
I'm not
that's
scared
so
of it.
powerful. And then you have choice to say, you know what, you're in a place right now that I don't feel comfortable with, and I'm going to give you some space to figure out those reactions or those triggers if you needed to. Or you can have those reactions and I'm still okay with it. I think when we bring up these types of conversations about how we can have relationships and friendships with people, even when we become healthy. And in fact, I mean, if you think about it, shouldn't our relationships with people, even the uncomfortable relationships, be even stronger if we're truly healthy? To me, it's always been backwards to get rid of people in your life and to deem them toxic and villains and all the things that we label people. That actually seems like more unhealthy to have to get rid of them. Again, like we've talked about, like being able to have a preference of like what I choose. Do I choose to be around people with certain types of behavior? Sometimes I don't, but it's my choice. It's not me having to protect myself because they're terrible people and I'm so healthy and they're so unhealthy. It's me saying we're equals. We both get triggered. I either have the capacity to be with you in my trigger, or I don't have the capacity to be with you in my trigger because I haven't taken care of my wound yet. And I just love that I can actually say, yeah, I can't be with that person right now, not because of them, but because my wound is still too
Yep.
raw, too vulnerable. I haven't been able to understand it or connect to it and fill it up to the degree that it needs in order to be with anyone.
Yeah. And really what you're describing is what you talk about with boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries pre-compassion method are very defensive. They're
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I got to get away. Boundaries post-compassion method are offensive. It's more of a
Yes.
preference. I don't, if I had to, I could, but I don't want to.
Yep, exactly. And I love that freedom because there's no judgment, there's no blame, there's no
Yep.
villains, there's no victims. There's just me saying, I used the example before, but same as, do I want Mexican food or Chinese food? It's as
Mm-hmm.
simple as that. I don't hate one and love the other. I don't think one's bad and one's good. It's just my preference.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. And I think all of this can be very empowering to people as they face those difficult relational dynamics that come with being a human being.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
as human beings, we are at our healthiest when we are in relationships with other human beings.
Yeah,
But it also can be very challenging because we've got all this.
definitely.
Everyone on the planet has got some measure of unprocessed pain
Exactly.
that's going to come out in inopportune ways at inopportune times and might not always be very pretty.
Exactly. And that's one thing that, I know as we're wrapping up, is really creating equality between you and your friendships, between you and your family members, recognizing that we're all the same. We all get triggered. Just because one person expresses it messier than another person doesn't make them any worse, doesn't make you any better. I feel like the superiority that comes along with getting emotionally healthy is very dividing because it says that now that I know what a trigger is, now that I know how to process a trigger, now that I know how to apply compassion, now that I know how to get my needs met, I'm superior. And those that are in their primal brains and in their trigger brains, they're inferior. They don't know what a trigger is. They don't know how to process the trigger. They don't know how to get their needs met. So they're inferior. And being able to ultimately have compassion that we once didn't know what triggers were. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know how to
Aren't you kind
process
of
them.
describing that knowledge puffs up? but love builds up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that is one of the, as much as I see getting rid of people, a common byproduct of people thinking that they're getting healthier in their relationships, I think feeling like we're superior.
Some judgment
and that
creeps
now
in.
we know so much that we can't hang out with those people because people say things like, I outgrew them. But we're not outgrowing them just because they're stuck in a trigger. And I learned how to process my trigger. They still have a true self. I still have a true self. We're equals.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We're all sojourners on this journey, learning to comfort that pain.
Yep. And that
learning to live more and more from our true self. Yeah.
Exactly. That humility allows us, first, remember this, everything we're saying today, you cannot do unless you give it to yourself first. So first, if you're coming up on, trying to process a friendship or process a holiday or process something that you're going through with a family member or a friend, do your pre-process like I talked about. Be able to recognize that it's always within you, whatever's going on, and be able to be okay, to be able to bring compassion or get your need met or whatever you need to go into any situation. And then secondary, to be able to see that person for who they are and be able to say their behavior matters, but they matter more. That's our goal in every single relationship that we have, that we would be able to say through a heart that's full and has been well taken care of, what they do matters, but they matter more. That's relationship. That's connection. That's what love looks like.
It's good. Well, thank you, Laura, for sharing all these amazing insights. And I'd like to remind our listeners that we'd love to hear from you. So you can go to triggeredandtrue.com and ask us a question or make a comment, and we would love to answer your question on one of these episodes. And also, if you want to learn more about Laura's full body of work, just go to lauraduncan.com and we talked a little bit about the school. I don't know if we mentioned the master course in today's episode, but you can learn more about that there, and also learn about meeting with people one-on-one, whether that be Laura or one of the wonderful students that are no longer students, but are practitioners of the compassion method that you can do a one-on-one with. So
yeah, lots of opportunity to learn how to be okay in any relationship, and definitely starts with you, but we've got lots of resources to help you be able to do your own process.
Yeah. So thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for listening. Goodbye. Thank you again for joining us for this episode of Triggered and True. We hope that you enjoyed it. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, go to triggeredandtrue.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and click Ask. And if you would like to learn more about the Compassion Method, be sure to check out the Compassion Method Master Course, which can be purchased at compassionmethod.net. And as a podcast listener, you qualify for a $50 discount, which can be obtained by typing in the coupon code podcast50. Again, that's compassionmethod.net, coupon code podcast50. Thank you again. Goodbye.